Hey everyone, Mr. MC here. This is a guide for round 6 of the 2023 Nations Cup Series taking place at Dragon Trail Seaside with the Volkswagen Scirocco Group 4. So it's a one-make race, 28 laps for those in GT1, 15 laps for those in GT2 and 3, where the fuel is a ×1, so fuel is not an issue, and the tower is a ×2, which will become an issue as we're only using the racing soft tires. This is with BOP on. You can adjust the brake balance, but everything else you cannot adjust. And there are no tire requirements, no mandatory pit stops. So let's go ahead and get started with the lap guide. So be aware that the wind speed and direction does change after each session, so you want to pay attention to where the wind is going and how strong the wind is, as you will need to adjust your driving style a bit to accommodate for that. Brake balance is at +5 for me for the qualifier and the race. So we're going to go ahead and bring this up towards the right side of the track. Stay on 5th gear if you're not under anyone's slipstream, and brake right as you pass the 150 meter board. Full braking power, turning in just as you're about to reach the 50 meter board. Go down to 3rd gear and you want to play around with your throttle input to help the car turn in a bit more, but shift up to 4th gear just as you clear the first chicane and avoid going too wide onto the curbs. Now this right kink can be taken flat out, but you want to make sure that the right wheels do not hit the curb. This is because if you hit that curb, oh boy, you're gonna have a really bad day. I'll show you what I mean. So for example, in this run, I try to go through this little kink flat out, but my right wheels hit the curb and yeah, it just throws the car out of control. And yeah, you'll ruin your race like that. So be careful if you do decide to try to cheese this turn. But anyways, brake right as the grass on the left starts. Full braking power, going down to 2nd gear. Turn in just as a curb on the left ends, and then go up to 3rd gear and try to get the car pointing where you want to go, and then get on the throttle. You don't want to fight it out with this car too much, as this car does get pretty understeery. But anyways, brake right as you're about to pass the orange barrier on the right. 50% braking power for a short moment, going on to 4th gear to help the car turn in a bit more, and try to get on the throttle as soon as you can and go through the S's flat out. And try not to turn in way too much like right here, as you do risk scrubbing off a bit of speed, which will hurt your time and your tire wear. But anyways, brake as you're passing the 150 meter board, so where this curb on the left starts. Full braking power, going down to 2nd gear for more rotation. Turn in just as the curb on the left is about to end, but exit on 3rd gear and try to avoid the curves on the left, as that will make you understeer quite a bit. This first chicane can be taken flat out, but for the 2nd chicane, you want to turn in where the curb on the right starts, so where the track marshals are on the right, that you're using them as your turn in, and you want to do a little lifting off the throttle to try to go through the chicane to death in as straight of a line as possible. Then bring yourself towards the left if you haven't done so yet, because you're braking before the 100 meter board. Here I brake a little too late, so you want to brake at around the 110, 115 meter mark. Full braking power, going on to 2nd gear for more rotation, but exit on 3rd gear and try to prioritize going for a late apex. That way you don't go way too wide onto the curbs and risk getting onto the grass. So there we go, that is it for this lap guide. Let's go ahead and go on over to the race strategies. Alright, here we are getting ready to start the strategies for those in GT2 and 3 leagues. So for you guys are doing 15 laps, and fuel is a ×1, so fuel is not an issue at all, but the tower is a ×2, and we're on the racing soft tires, so tire wear is actually going to be a bit of an issue, because you guys are gonna have to go for the 0 stop. And I'm gonna put this here right now. The 1 stop is a little too slow for it to work. You're gonna be around 9 to 10 seconds slower if you try to go for the 1 stop. The only way the 1 stop will work is if those doing the 0 stop all keep hitting the chicane to death. But if no one hits it, the 1 stop will not work. Again, it's just a little too slow. So with this car, the front wheels are basically doing everything. They're doing the accelerating, as this car is a front wheel drive. The car's engine is also in the front, so this car is front heavy. It's also doing a bit of the braking, and you're also doing the turning with those front wheels. So those front wheels will take a huge beating, and it is your job to try to make those tires last. So you will want to bring the brake balance towards the back of the car, so you want it set to +5. That way you get a little bit of tire wear off from the front tires. I mean, I know it's not really going to do much with this car, but every little bit helps. But the main way that you'll be tire saving is when you're going through the turns. So when you're going through a turn, so for example this final turn, you want to try your best to avoid hitting steering lock. So that little red dot that is above the shift bar, you want to try your best to avoid it from hitting one side of the shift bar, as at that point you're hitting the steering lock and you risk increasing tire wear that way. And this is especially the case, for example, going back to the last turn, if you try to get on the throttle as you're going through the turn, you're gonna get understeer. The front wheels will start to spin, so you're not turning at this point, you're just understeering off the track, and you're just going to increase your tire wear that way. So you might need to just let the car coast for a moment, so no braking, no throttle input, let the car do its turning, and once you get the car pointing where you want to go, then get on the throttle. And you especially want to do it with these cars because, again, it's the front wheels that are taking a huge beating in this race, so you want to make sure that those tires last the entire race. And yeah, tire wear does become a bit miserable, and you're trying to avoid that inevitability. So that's basically your goal for this race if you're in GT2 and 3. I mean, it's also the goal for those in GT1, where you're trying to make those tires last as long as possible by bringing the brake balance to +5 or all the way to the back of the car, and just being mindful about how much steering input you're using as you go through these turns. You're trying not to fight with the car too much, as fighting with the car too much will risk getting you a lot of understeer, and you're just gonna make your tires wear out a bit faster that way. And again, just try not to fight with this car. A bit easier said than done with these front wheel drive cars, as they are pretty understeery to begin with. So now let's go ahead and just jump on over towards the halfway point of the race to get an idea about what the tires are looking like. So the start of lap number 7, things are looking pretty good so far, getting mid 144s, and we do have a bit of tire wear on different tires, but the tire wear hasn't started to rear its ugly head just yet, so we will be good for a little bit longer as long as we keep driving smoothly and just keep an eye on how much steering input we're using with this car. And one thing I do want to say is that slipstream is going to be a pretty big thing in this race, because you have a long main straight, a sort of long second straight after the S's on sector number 2, and then you have the sort of long straight after the chicane of death in sector number 3. So you can use these areas to really take advantage of the slipstream from those in front of you to try to set yourself up to go for an overtake. You can even use a slipstream to try to work with those around you. So maybe a little bit of bump drafting, help those around you go a little bit faster to either catch up to the next group of cars or to try to break away from those behind you. And just as I mentioned earlier, you can use the slipstream to help yourself set up for an overtake. So if you get a really good exit out of a turn and you're really catching up to someone in front of you, you can use that bit of slipstream to try to slingshot yourself past the car and try to get the move done. So we'll go ahead and finish lap number 7 just to get an idea about what lap times we are doing now. So up to this point, things have been looking pretty good. So the end of lap number 7 is actually going to be a 144.8. So tire wear is starting to become a little bit noticeable, but it's not an issue just yet. About 0.3 off of my personal best. So yeah, tire wear a little bit noticeable, but it's not a big deal just yet. So the end of lap number 10, poking into the 145s. It was actually lap number 9 where I poked into the 145s range. And also, I don't know how the heck I was getting pretty consistent laps. I did a lot of test runs here and I kept on messing up a lot of them, or they were wildly inconsistent. I don't know what happened here, but if I can maintain this consistency in the actual race, I'll be pretty happy about that. But anyways, also another note on the slipstream: when you're under zone slipstream, you're going a bit faster, so make sure you brake a little bit earlier, because if you use your usual braking point when you're under zone slipstream, you do risk overshooting that braking zone and end up going into whoever is in front of you. But anyways, back onto this. So yeah, this lap, so lap number 11, this is where tire wear is starting to become a bit painful. So as your tires wear out, you want to try to adjust your driving style a little bit to make sure that you don't get the front wheels spinning way too much, because as the tires wear out, it becomes easier for the front wheels to break grip and start to do a lot of wheel spin, so you're getting a lot of understeer, and you want to try to avoid that. So just letting the car turn in a little bit more and then get on the throttle, straighten up your steering as you're getting on the throttle to try to avoid fighting with the car, try to avoid that nasty wheel spin, avoid that understeer, and to save a little bit of tire life. And well, yeah, this will also be a thing for those in GT1. Hopefully you're watching this, by the way. But anyways, end of lap number 11. So this one was, yeah, it's getting a little nasty now. We're about 9/10 down from our personal best. So yeah, tire wear is gonna get a little miserable. If you're good with tire saving, then you will be able to delay this by quite a bit, and hopefully tire wear doesn't become too miserable for you towards the end of the race. And yeah, towards the end of the race, that's where you want to be pretty careful about how you're driving the car, especially as you go through the turns. Again, just trying to avoid that wheel spin, trying to avoid the understeer, as you don't want to catch yourself understeering onto the chicane of death. Here I do tap a little bit on the brakes, as I feel like I need to adjust myself to try not to bend it at the chicane of death. At least for me, that's a thing. I don't know if it'll be a thing for you, but I just want to put that out there. And again, just trying to be really careful here, braking a little bit earlier to try to make sure that I don't overshoot the turns. And yeah, so the final laps, 145s. This one was almost a 146 for lap number 15 as tire wear was starting to get pretty miserable. So for the 0 stop run, this was a 26-minute and 18-second run, and that's doing tire saving. Just try not to wear out the tires too quickly and not stopping at all. We'll take a quick look at the one stop to show you why it's just not going to work. We'll skip on over towards the end of lap number 8, as this is where I pit in. If you do have to pit, stay towards the right side of the track as you go through the final turn, because those white lines come out of you out of nowhere, and you don't want to cross them, as you'll get a 3-second penalty for crossing those lines. This also applies to the ones at the exit of the pit stop. But yeah, here's the thing about the one stop: it's a little too slow, and you're going to be losing about 20 seconds. 20 seconds is your pit loss time just for a tire change. And oh yeah, you're still losing time as you're going down the main straight, because you're gaining speed whereas other cars are already close to their max speed. And with there only being 15 laps, it's just not enough time to do a pit stop, cancel out the pit loss, and maybe gain positions. Again, this race is a little too short for that to happen. For those in GT1, yeah, they'll have to pit because they're racing for almost an hour. But for this one, you're racing for 26 minutes, and yeah, not enough time to do a one stop. You have to 0 stop the race. So in this run, I did hit the end of the chicane of death a couple times. Don't mind the cat that is in the background. But anyways, so in this run, I did lose a bit of time because of the chicane of death. So I will be generous and deduct 3 seconds from my total time. So I think in this run, this was a 26 minutes and 32 second run. So if I detect 3 seconds, that'd be a 26.29, and that is still too slow. That's about 10 seconds slower than the 0 stop. So the 1 stop is a no-go for those in GT2 and 3. For GT2 and 3, you have to 0 stop the race, do a bit of tire saving, and not hit the chicane to death. Alright, so for those in the GT1 league, oh boy, this race is so long that you actually have to go for the 1 stop only for a tire change. So as I mentioned in the GT2 and 3 sections of the guide, you have to be mindful about how much steering input you're using, because if you're just thrashing the car around and just steering as much as you can through each and every single turn, you risk having your tires wear out faster, which will make the tire wear, well, it'll get pretty ugly as you enter the end of your stint, as your car will just refuse to turn, and yeah, you'll lose a lot of time or end up hitting the chicane to death. Don't hit the chicane to death. But anyways, also bring the brake balance towards the back of the car, so +5 brake bias to try to save those front tires a little bit more. But the main thing you're doing here is just trying to be careful about how much steering input you're using as you go through your stints. So I'm not gonna talk about this section too much because this one is pretty straightforward. You have to 1 stop the race. So let's go on over towards the end of the stint. Alright, so we're approaching the end of the stint. Tire wear is getting a little nasty. As you can see, the front tires are the ones taking a beating here. So it was around laps 7 to 8 where the tire wear started to get a little nasty for me. So that's where I started to notice that the car was getting a little bit understeery. And once that starts to happen, that's where you want to adjust your driving style to accommodate for that. So you might need to brake a little bit earlier for the most part to make sure that you don't overshoot a turn and end up losing a lot more time. And again, you're trying not to fight with this car too much, because the moment that you start to fight it out with this car, yeah, the car's gonna win. It's gonna tell you, you know what, I don't want to turn, and it's just not gonna turn, especially once the front tires start to wear out. So in this race, I'm pitting at the end of lap number 13. That way I can get a new set of racing soft tires, and I will also have a little bit more tire life to mess around with because I have used up a bit of fuel. Also, stay towards the right side of the track as you go through the final turn. Otherwise, you do risk crossing those white lines and end up picking up a 3-second penalty. And that is the last thing that you want to pick up as you enter the pit stop. But anyways, pit loss here is around 20 seconds. But again, this race is so long that you will want to go for a pit stop. Do not 0 stop the race unless if you're a tire saving god. Even then, that's probably still not gonna work. So yeah, we're gonna go for the 1 stop here. So with that, we have a little bit less fuel, which means that the car is a little bit lighter, which means that the tires will be able to last a little bit longer. So that's good for us because we're gonna do 15 laps on the racing soft tires for stint number 2. So I'm actually just going to go ahead and skip towards the end of the race. So now we're on lap number 28 out of 28. And again, the tire wear does become an issue. So as the tires wear out, whether this is the end of stint number 1 or stint number 2, you want to be a bit more careful about how you're driving, because it becomes a lot easier to overshoot a braking zone, or it ends up being a lot easier to fight out with the car, which is just going to result in a ton of understeer and a ton of time lost. So you're trying to minimize that, adjusting your driving style as the race goes on to accommodate for the current situation that you're in. And the chicane to death as your tires wear out, you want to be a little more careful about how you approach it. One thing that I kind of noticed I started to do was use a little bit of braking as I was getting ready to enter the chicane to death, to try to adjust myself so I could try to go through it in as straight of a line as possible. At least for me, that's what kind of works as the tires wear out. But here you go. So we're going to go ahead and go towards the end of the race. Yeah, 49 minutes. 49 minutes of racing for those in GT1. It's a long race, this one. And yeah, you're gonna go for the one stop in this race. Yeah, it's a long race. Yeah, it took a while for me to record all this, so that is it for me. So if you like this video, you can press a like, subscribe, all that good stuff. And if you really like my work, you can join the membership program thing if you want to support this channel further. It really helps me out. So that's going to be it for me. Thank you for watching this video. Thanks to channel members for also supporting the channel. And that's it for me. So take care, and I'll see you in the next video.